So in this video, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time making something very clear for people in general, because in our day and age, there seems to be a drive on to create a negative association between preachers and An Garda Síochána. It's like preachers are the target of An Garda Síochána simply for the purposes of like giving the impression as though the preacher is in the wrong or behaving in an antisocial manner because they're expressing opinions that the majority of people don't agree with. Of course, that's not the case. If you were only allowed to express opinions and beliefs that were popular, how would you ever get change? And so in a democracy, the expectation is that you're able to affect change to a certain degree. There's somebody texting right now on this video. It says, "Go asleep there, horse." Firstly, I'm not a horse, but I do appreciate that sometimes people use that as an affectionate term. But given that your name is Father Ted Crilly, the Bible says, "Call no man father." So that's not a good sign. But as soon as you're interrupting the video, I have a specific point to make. I don't intend to go asleep, but rather complete the video. So your suggestion is welcome, but I won't be following it. So the thing is that when you're out in public, there is an expectation that you'll express the opinions that everybody wants to hear. Like, tickle my ears and tell me what I want to hear, you know what I mean? Now, obviously, we're in summertime, and for some reason in Wexford town, the Bullring, which would be just the square in the main thoroughfare, has effectively been turned into a beer garden. And I've actually seen people sit down on the chairs that the local pub has placed in the public area, and he'll come out and he'll tell them to go away from the chairs, even though there are like many empty chairs. He'll tell them to clear off because they're not customers. And I'm kind of thinking, this is a public place. It's not a beer garden, but the pub is using it as his beer garden. And so you've got people coming down on their holidays acting as though they're in a beer garden when they're actually in the main square in the town. So it's a thoroughfare, it's open to the public. It's ridiculous. It's like, how do you make people uncomfortable in the main thoroughfare in the town, turn it into a beer garden and chase anybody who's not buying beer away or buying something from the pub away? It's hardly good for like even the image of the town and welcoming tourists or people passing through, or even the locals who aren't drinking during the day. Like, who does that? Who wants to go into the public place and not drink during the day? I mean, it's preposterous that they've turned it into a beer garden. But anyway, I'll go up and I'll herald and I'll preach the gospel, but I'll also do another obligation of a Christian. And that other obligation is to expose the unfruitful works of darkness. That is to say that the Bible commands us as Christians have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. So it's not good enough as a Christian to merely not partake of the corruptions, but we're actually commanded and mandated to expose them. So, because we're mandated to expose them, we should go about doing that. Sorry, a question here. What do you think of the Westbury Baptist Church? I think I've heard of this, and wasn't there a guy banned from Ireland from preaching in Ireland from that church, or something affiliated with it. I'm not sure now, I can't be 100% sure. But I know there was one guy who visited Ireland, and he has very strong anti-homosexual views, and would actually be in support of uh, the killing of homosexuals. So I'm not sure if that guy is actually tied to the Westbury Baptist Church, but I'm not a Baptist, and I don't for 1 second believe that anybody should be harmed at all. I'm a believer in grace. I believe we're living in the dispensation of grace, and God wants all of us to come to peace and not see harm. So we're living in a very different time to times gone by. You know, somebody who's effectively promoting, Sharia law, I think ought to be, denied the opportunity to try and promote that. I do believe that, because it's actually inciting violence. It's against the laws of Ireland to say that you believe that minority groups should be harmed in any way, physically or otherwise. Sorry, just another message coming through there. So, I'm not. No, I'm not affiliated with Baptist churches. I think the Westbury Baptist Church is a bit extreme if I'm thinking of the right church. But I know that there's a preacher who's actually been barred from Ireland. He's been banned from preaching in Ireland because he was actually inciting violence, I think. Now, I can't fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Corroborate that, but that's just what was in the media. So, I mean, I haven't seen any video evidence of that occurring or any footage, and, so. Which actually leads me on to my next point. I was preaching today in the Bullring in Wexford, and people were there sort of treating the square effectively like a beer garden, because the local publican has put out chairs in the middle of the square and turned it effectively into a beer garden. So, I mean, I don't know how I'm being intrusive when the place has been turned into a beer garden. I mean, and people who sit down who aren't buying beer or any, a beverage from the pub are pretty much just hunted off the chairs. And it's not as if they have an abundance of public seating or something, you know what I mean? They're pretty much just going from the chair to the standing position or leaving the area. I think it's quite hostile, actually, because the chairs are rarely full. Anyway, carousing in the daytime. But to make my point, so I was talking today about abortion, and actually it was sort of a drive-by question actually the other day. A lady said, what about a 10-year-old who gets raped? And then she was gone as soon as she came. Do you know what I mean? It was like she came over, I was preaching, she came over really close, and she said, what about a 10-year-old who gets raped? Because I was talking about abortion, you see. So it's sort of like a hit and run question. They ask the question, then they're gone, not waiting for the answer. So it's like a setup, they're trying to set up some kind of controversy. I'm preaching a long time now. It wouldn't be my first time seeing that kind of crack, where they'll ask you the question deliberately to, have some kind of confrontation, or at least give people in the area the impression as though confrontation was taking place, and then they don't hang around, they leg it. So it's like, what about, and then they're gone, so it's like, what was the point of just kind of bawling at me, asking me a question, and then disappearing and not waiting around for the answer? Obviously, it's not. They don't intend to get the answer if they don't wait around for it. So sometimes I would address these issues. I would say, well, somebody getting raped is obviously an issue that is very serious. It's traumatic. But how can people see this as some kind of a justification for a further trauma to that woman? You know, firstly, she's been raped, then um, another trauma has occurred, and the rationale behind it, or their attempt to justify it, is merely um, because the woman, you know, would go through some, you know, emotional difficulty in raising a child that came about as the result of a rape. So, you know, I made a few points that would be hard to listen to, in terms of, they would be, for people who are pro-abortion, they would be quite poignant, potent points, you know. Um, and of course, in the bull ring, like if you set it up as a beer garden, there are going to be people there on their holidays, trying, you know, drinking, trying to relax or whatever it is. It's not the place for it. Like, who turns a public square into a pub? Who does that? And then expects that to be policed by An Garda Síochána? I mean, it's absolutely hideous. Like, daytime is absolutely a reasonable time for anybody to campaign, you know, for or against abortion in Ireland. If you're for abortion, you can go out and you can campaign for it. If you're against it, you can go out and you can campaign against it. But the guard approached me today as though I'd done something wrong in talking about abortion and addressing, you know, topics that somebody might raise in sort of opposition to the anti-abortion worldview or position, using that a woman might, or a young woman might have got raped. And so I don't know how they think that, even if they were to justify, even if they were, everybody was to agree and say, well, look, that's sort of justifiable instance where a woman gets raped. Okay, well, but still, it's still a very rare minority of women who would avail of, you know, the ability to have their baby killed. You call it abortion if you want, um, to have their baby aborted, um, as a result of having been raped. So the real issue would be, why are you trying to sort of allow anybody for any reason kill their baby, um, and try to justify that by a very rare case? It's like, because of this very rare instance, let's let anybody kill their baby at will. It doesn't, it's what they've actually affected doesn't show that their concern was genuine to begin with. Because they didn't bring a referendum saying women who are raped can abort their children, abort the baby. They didn't say that. They said any woman can at any time abort their child if they want. So that's a bit of a leap, isn't it? Don't you think? That's a huge leap. So it shows that their position was disingenuous. That wasn't their motivation. So coming down and saying, oh, what about the woman who gets raped? Obviously, that's a very sensitive issue. But like, you don't even hang around for the answer. You don't even hang around to have the conversation. You just bawl this at the preacher and then you leg it. It's just all about the drama and creating the negative association, and not actually hanging around to have a logical and calm and rational and reasonable discussion about the issues surrounding abortion, for and against. So, I mean, if you're not willing to have that discussion and you're just going to bawl questions at people, when I say bawl, I mean shouting, like, because the woman was only sort of, I would say, maximum 3 meters away from me, and she was bawling. Like, what about the 10-year-old that gets raped? And then she was gone. It's like, that is not normal behaviour. You just ask the question. But sometimes it's a question, but it's not intended as one. It's just an opportunity to shout at you, to make it look as though you're totally in the wrong. But they're not actually hanging around to have the conversation with you. If they cared, they'd hang around and have the conversation. Then you might say, well, maybe they didn't have enough time, and you angered them. I angered them in the 5 seconds that it took them to pass in front of me, shout at me, and dart off. So, if you're genuinely interested in having the conversation about abortion, or you're genuinely interested in really discussing those issues which people try to justify pro-abortion legislature with, like the young woman was raped, or an inviable birth where if the baby is attempted even to be birthed, that the mother might die. These are all very, uh, uh, they happen, but they're rare. And I don't know how anybody who's reasonably minded would think, because of a very rare instance, let's generally allow anybody kill their babies at will. That's not rational. That's like 1 and 1 equals 500. It's a complete, it's a leap away from what would be considered a measured response, even if you were to react to the point you've raised. Like, if 10-year-olds raped, well, the reality of a 10-year-old being raped is, okay, she might have reached puberty. A 10-year-old might have reached puberty. So obviously we're assuming that 10-year-old had the ability to get pregnant, or the woman wouldn't have said 10-year-old that got raped. So let's assume that a 10-year-old for some reason is sexually mature, and they're saying that women are becoming sexually mature younger nowadays for some reason. I'm not sure why that's happening, but they're saying that it's happening. So if the 10-year-old got raped and the 10-year-old got pregnant, it's reasonable to think that 10-year-old's not actually physically developed enough yet to birth a child, that her own pelvis wouldn't be large enough. The birth canal wouldn't actually be large enough for the baby to pass through. That's actually reasonable to think that might be the case. So in that instance, obviously it would be barbaric to try and ask that child to push a baby out of the birth canal of through her pelvis, when that could kill both her and the baby. That's obviously a very unique and rare situation. So if you could employ even a cesarean section to avoid that, then that would be a good idea. But it still might not actually be necessary to kill that baby, because there might be a couple who can't have a baby who would take that baby into their custody. So a baby being adopted is always better than a baby being murdered. And there are other ways around it. So I grant you, of course, like, I'm not like hard and fast this or that. If there's an opportunity to perform a careful surgery on that little 10-year-old and take the baby out, and try and save the baby's life as well, then do it. I would be for that. I know it's not the ideal. I know it's not perfect as God intended it. But if the ability is there to remove the baby safely and keep the woman unharmed, then that's a conversation you could have. But to say, because a 10-year-old was raped, let's give women the right to kill their babies whenever they want for any reason, is absolutely not genuine. So don't pretend it is. Don't insult our intelligence. Why would you do that to us? We're not stupid. That's miles away from a 10-year-old got raped. Oh yeah, you can all kill your babies at will. It's miles away from it. So stop pretending. We're not stupid. Women want to kill their babies because they want to sleep with whoever they want and they don't want to have to pay for them if they get pregnant. Because most men are not in a position to marry the woman they impregnate nowadays because the society and the government aren't giving them gainful employment. Now, if the guards are called because I have some kind of a conversation like that, we've got a serious problem. It's absolutely reasonable for me to discuss what I just discussed now on this video in a public place. Absolutely within my rights, and it's absolutely reasonable, and there's nothing obscene about it. Nothing. People stand and hold pictures of aborted babies on the side of the street. Like, how do you think that somebody campaigned against abortion before the referendum? And we live in a democracy, so if we revisited pro-abortion legislature, and I believe we should, then obviously people would be campaigning against it and giving reasons as to why we should campaign against it in a public place. What kind of tyranny are we living under now that we can't discuss anti-abortion reasonings in public, lest the guards be called because somebody got upset? Boo-hoo! You're old enough to drink during the day, but you're not old enough to hear about anti-abortion rhetoric and narrative and campaign and justification and reasoning. Grow up. It's time to grow up. People with this pretendy, I don't like to hear anything that's a little bit, difficult to talk about or listen to over my drink here during the day because I'm on holidays. It's not a holiday resort. It's the public thoroughfare. And that's where preachers are supposed to herald. That's where people who would engage their freedom of speech are expected to be, in the public thoroughfare. They're not engaging their freedom of speech to talk to themselves. It's a public outreach. That's the whole point. So why would you expect otherwise? Why would the guards even bother coming over to the preacher to tell him somebody is complaining? I don't care. I don't care if somebody would rather not hear about a 10-year-old getting raped. First of all, I didn't raise the subject. Some woman shouted it before she legged it down the road. Maybe she was a plant. Then the guards come down the road later on. Stephen. Yes? And eventually the guards went away. First they tried to give me a Section 8 order, which is to leave the area. And in order to give a Section 8, you have to be of the opinion you have to have witnessed Section 4, 5, 6, 7 or 9 having been breached of the same act, Public Order Act 1994. So if that hasn't happened, if you haven't witnessed I think it's 3, 4, 5, 7 or 9 or 3, 5 being breached, you're not in a position to give a Section 8 order for a person to leave the area. Preaching anti-abortion, having an anti-abortion discussion is not a breach of public order. Campaigning against abortion is not a breach of the public order. Should never be expected to be a breach of the public order. Preaching is just even discussing the unfortunate rape of a woman surrounding matters of abortion are not after the watershed discussions. They're discussions that could be had in the public, campaigning and outreaching to people. Absolutely. So, discussing rape as it pertains to abortion. Like, I'm not talking about standing there, discussing the details of a rape or something. That would be ridiculous. That would be obscene. I'm talking about just the topic of rape, like to mention rape. When somebody says rape is the reason we should abort our children, then obviously we can address it topically, not in detail. There's no need for that. Just topically. But if you were talking about, like I said in this video, if you were talking about, you could say something like, if a 10-year-old is raped, obviously she's not mature at that age, potentially to deliver the baby. You can use that type of language. That's not obscenity. That's not obscenity. Obscenity is something deliberately perverse or overtly sexual. Something perverse, something lewd or salacious. That's what obscenity is. Or nudity, inappropriate nudity. That's what obscenity is. Like discussing topically, just on the surface, just mentioning the word rape, like for the purposes of discussion, that's not obscenity. It's not a breach of public order. You're well within your rights to express your opinions against abortion or against rape of a young woman being the reason that everybody should have access to kill their babies whenever they want. That's ridiculous. Because all you're doing is endowing the rapist. Look at the harm he has done. If we're making pro-abortion legislature on account of a rape, look how much damage that rape has done then. How many babies has it led to the murder of? It doesn't make sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. So obviously the guards went away because they didn't have a leg to stand on. The discussion has already been had at High Court level. We're within our rights to discuss these issues, folks. For or against abortion. You are entitled to have these discussions in public. And we're entitled to address them down the Bullring in Wexford Town or down the Market Square in another town or wherever it is. You are within your rights to discuss anti-abortion matters. And the approach I take is that if a baby in the womb ever had the right to life, and they did quite recently, and for hundreds of years, the baby in the womb has had the right to life. Since God created Adam and Eve got pregnant, the baby in the womb has the right to life. And I'll explain why, as an Irishman, I know that. Because we refer to the Bible for the definitions. It says that in the preamble of the Irish Constitution. It says, in the name of the most holy Trinity, from and to whom is our final end, all actions both of men and states must be referred. We, the people of Eire, humbly acknowledging all our obligations to our divine Lord Jesus Christ, who sustained our fathers through centuries of trial. You see that? So, what's said in the initial part of that preamble, it says, in the name of the most holy Trinity, from and to whom is our final end, all actions, both of men and states, must be referred. So we're referring obviously to the Bible, because that's the only word we have from God. We can't get him on the phone, so we have to refer to his word to know what the definitions of these things are. And the Bible tells us in Leviticus 17:11, my Bible here, okay? Just a moment. Okay. Just a moment. Did I go past it there? Excuse me. Just a moment. There it is. Okay, bear with me now. I'm just turning pages. So 16, 17, and 11. So, I'll read it to you now from the book. You can see it yourself. What am I doing in Exodus? Sorry about that. I saw Leviticus and I was in Exodus. It's the book beside. 17:11. Oh yes, I'll show you now. Ready? Turn the camera. Okay. I'll just make it easier and I'll put the phone in the holder. And then you can see, Evan, look, here. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. In other translations it says, for the life of the creature is the blood therein. For the life of the creature is the blood therein. So do you see, the life of the creature is the blood therein. So if the life of the creature is the blood therein, guys, then does the baby in the womb have blood? First of all, does the baby in the womb have flesh? Yeah, of course. Does the baby in the womb have blood? Yes. So what does the baby have then? Life. So do you see why our forefathers said that? The baby in the womb has life, and this is what's most important. Now that we know the baby in the womb has life, not only according to the Bible, which is the Word of God, but also to secular science. Secular science will tell you that the blood is the transportation system within the body. It's the medium of transportation, moving oxygen to the cell, which is life, the breath of life. So the cell has life when the blood has transported oxygen from the respiratory system to the cell, and the vascular system, or the veins, transport the blood all the way around the body. The heart is the pump. So now you have this system of the transportation of oxygen facilitated by the blood, which is the carrier. So the life of the creature is the blood therein. Leviticus 17:11. For the life of the flesh is the blood. So does the baby in the womb have flesh? Yes. Does the baby in the womb have blood? Yes. So does it have life? Yes. So if the baby in the womb has life, and the right to life is imprescriptible, this is what's important. If the right to life is imprescriptible, do you know what this word means? You should Google it for your own good. The word imprescriptible means it cannot be removed from the writings. It cannot be removed from the law. The right to life is imprescriptible because it's God-given. So who do they think they are campaigning to remove an imprescriptible right? as bold as they like, not fearing a life imprisonment. The right to life is imprescriptible, so anybody who tries to remove that right commits high treason, because they're committing crimes against humanity. It's infanticide that they're inciting. They're inciting violence against the baby in the womb. That's against the law in Ireland, to incite violence. They're the ones who are antisocial. They're the ones who are actually inciting violence against the baby in the womb. As soon as they started the campaign for a referendum to remove the imprescriptible right to life, you can't remove the imprescriptible right. By definition, it's inalienable, it's antecedent, which means it came before even the Constitution of Ireland. The right to life has always been there, obviously, as long as there's been life. So that's why killing is called murder. It's theft. It's a form of theft. You're stealing that person's life from them. You're stealing it away. And so who is within their rights? Who's within their rights to do that? Nobody. The right to life of the creature is imprescriptible. The right to life of human beings is imprescriptible. You can't remove it. So what did they do? They committed serious crimes, serious treasons, serious crimes against humanity, inciting violence. And it's not only in Ireland that they've done it. It's a move of the devil. And it's his synagogue that have set it up through the organs of state. Freemasonry is at the heart of it. It's barbaric, guys. It's barbaric. Excuse me. So, as a Christian preacher, I'm not going to be bullied out of the place, because the guards show up. I'm not going to be bullied out of it. It's not going to happen. I've been to the High Court. I know my rights. I know what shouldn't be uttered in public. And I know what is permissible to utter in public. I didn't go through all this and not discover what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. You are allowed to voice your opinions and beliefs in Ireland. And if the guards keep coming against people trying to shut them down when they're doing it, they run the risk of going to jail. Seriously. They can't be throwing the laws around trying to use them as an intimidation tactic. You really can't be doing that now. Because that's harassment. You're causing harassment, alarm and distress by mentioning Section 8 of the Criminal Justice Public Order Act that a person has to leave the area. That's harassment. That is a breach of the public order. Misusing the laws and misquoting people's rights and that kind of thing. Impeding upon them. That's not good enough. Guards have to be held responsible for what they do as well. And they're committing crimes if they start telling people to leave the area when they don't have to actually leave the area, when they're within their rights to stay. That's bully tactic now. That's bullying, that's harassment, that's intimidation tactic. And that's a crime in Ireland. Guards aren't allowed to do that, to misuse their uniform like that to intimidate people. Now, I'm not going to be bullied around them. As Christians, we're meek and easily imposed upon, but there's times when we'll call out corruption for what it is like. It would say, you're not going to bully us. Like, we're not going to shrink back all the time and just run away every time the yellow uniform comes down the road. It's not because we don't respect the guards. It's because we don't encourage misuse of the uniform. You know what I mean? Like, just bullying people because you'd rather they didn't talk about what they're talking about because maybe you don't agree with them or whatever it is, or somebody doesn't agree with them and you're just trying to appease them as a guard. And that's not what you're there to do. You're there to uphold the laws. You're not there to appease people on their holidays. Like, that's not what it is. Like, the bull ring in Wexford's not a beer garden. It's not. It's a public place that a business is pretty much monopolizing. They've turned it effectively into a beer garden. I mean, who do you get permission off to do that? The council? The council are allowing pubs to turn the centre of town into a beer garden? What? The public thoroughfare, guys, is obviously where most people are going to be. It's the busiest part of town. It's like a sort of a central junction for this way or that, you know. So obviously it's a vantage point for anybody who wants to address the public. And that's like the other day there was a boxing club was holding a ceremony and they had big speakers out and all that. And they're within their rights to do it. Nobody was telling them, come on, clear off now, turn down the music, you know, we're trying to sit around here. None of that. They're within their rights to do it. You know, there's another guy there that does tours. He's a tour guide there. He does be talking there. We're all within our rights to use and share the area. You know, if there's somebody there playing music, sometimes I'll head off and let them do their bit of busking to make their few quid or whatever. There's years there I was busking, so I know what it's like. But the point I'm making is that, you know, whatever about sharing the space and everybody being cognizant that other people want to use the area as well and, you know, that kind of stuff, that's fine. But sometimes, like, the preacher's going to be there for an hour and a half talking about stuff that not everybody wants to hear. And that's okay. They don't have to want to hear it, but they do have to tolerate it because that's the nature of freedom of speech. The guards aren't your own personal sort of, you know, mercs. You don't pay them enough for that. That's actually unlawful, to start using them as your own little bullies, to go around and start harassing people because you don't like what they're saying, or you'd rather they didn't have that opinion, or because they're forming their points so well that it's sort of touching your heart and you're uncomfortable with it because you voted for pro-abortion or whatever it is. But that's just tough, because you want a democratic society. You live in a democratic society. You utilize your vote when it's available. And then you don't want to hear about other people who have a difference of opinion. That's hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy. So why don't you just leave the preachers alone to do their bit of preaching? Who are they actually harming? We're not harming anybody. But of course, if what we're saying is actually starting to have a bit of effect and they don't want it to, I mean, when I say they, I mean people who are opposed to your viewpoint. Because it's a struggle. It's a power struggle. There are people who want the pro-abortion and there are people who don't. And that's a struggle. But what they can't start doing is misusing the guards and misrepresenting the laws. That's very serious crime, actually. That's very serious crime. So I would deter them from doing that, because they really do run the risk of incriminating themselves very seriously. So blessings in Jesus' name. And unfortunately, as Christians, we're in this position, and we won't back down from it. We're not aggressive people. We're not, trying to force anything on anybody. But what we sometimes do is we rebuke. And you see, rebuke is when you tell somebody they're in the wrong. And people don't like to hear that they're in the wrong. Look what they did to Jesus. They killed him for telling them that they were doing evil. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm saying that, abortion is evil. It's evil. Abortion is evil. And that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying it in a way that talks about the laws of the land and how we should rightly interpret them. The right to life of the baby still exists, because you can't remove it from it by a referendum. You can't remove the right to life by referendum. That's preposterous. That's madness. That somebody would think they can remove the right to life by ticking a box. It's mad. It's lunacy. For thousands of years we've known that the baby in the womb is living, and now you want to say they're not? And without any evidence? The baby in the womb has life and the right therefore to it, and it's imprescriptible. So you can't bring a referendum to remove it. So let's remove the legislations and stop killing the babies in the womb. And stop telling men that they don't have houses or jobs. And then they would actually be able to pay for their children and the woman that they get pregnant and marry them, because now they'd have enough money to do it and a place to live. I mean, if you don't give a man enough money and a place to live, how is he going to look after his family? And then they wonder why people are opting for they kill their baby. They're not wondering at all. They're orchestrating it, fabricating it and designing it. It's social engineering. So they take away gainful employment, and that destroys the household, because you've removed the man as the head with the ability to provide for his house. And still have a little bit left over. And that's what gainful employment means. Because you're gaining, you see. If you're not gaining, and I'm not talking about, living in your mammy's box room so you're gaining, because mommy doesn't charge you for your dinner or your washing and only charges you a little bit for the box room. That's not gainful employment. That's you living below the poverty line so that you can have a little bit of quids in the bank or a bit of pocket money. That's ridiculous. A man who's working 40 hours a week, 39 hours a week, whatever it is, by law, by the Irish Constitution, should have enough money, effectively, to have his own house and to be able to pay for it and his pregnant wife. Now we have this ridiculous situation that both him and her are working, and then when she gets pregnant, she has to put her hand out to the government. That's preposterous. Why is she going to work if when she becomes pregnant, she still has to put her hand out to the government? When our fathers' wives got pregnant, do you think they put their hand out to the government? They did not. So they want, basically what they're telling you is, it's all psychological. We own your children because we're paying for them. No, they don't. They don't have any money to give us because we give it to them. They don't have any money to give us. Where do you think they get their money? They get it from us. So why are the women giving them the money so they can give it back to them when they're pregnant? That's ridiculous. It's all psychological. There's no logical reason for it other than a psychological one, which is to tell you we own you and the next generation. We paid for them. They're ours. You see how ridiculous it is now? So you remove gainful employment from the conversation, what happens? They're buying your children off you, even though both of you are working. It's ridiculous, guys. You need to wake up. Gainful employment is a constitutional right of an Irishman. Why aren't the government ensuring it? Blessings.